Today we're going to continue to talk about the Pythagorean theorem, but yesterday when we were looking at it, or in our last video, we were kind of emphasizing that if you know both of the legs, A and B here, you can find the hypotenuse by just using this simple formula, A squared plus B squared equals C squared, or the leg squared plus leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. But what happens if you already know the hypotenuse and you're missing one of the legs? That's what we're going to emphasize today. So here's what that looks like. So if you put them into the Pythagorean theorem, you're going to have a squared plus 6 squared equals 11 squared. Because you don't know a, but you do know b and c. In order to find a, then we're going to have to do a little rearranging, and we're going to actually have to subtract 6 squared from both sides, as you can see here, and then finish solving the problem. So what would that look like if we did that? Well, you'd have a squared equals an 11 squared. Let's get our calculator just in case you don't know what 11 squared is. We have 11 times 11 equals 121. So 121 minus 36. So 131 minus 36. 121 minus 36 is 85. So then we're going to do the square root of 85. And so in order to find a, we had to do the square root of both sides. And that ended up being a equals the square root of 85. And we know that 9 times 9 is 81. So this is going to be a little bit more than 81. So it's actually going to be 9.2 if we round it to the nearest tenth. And there we go, 9.2. And we'll, on the assignment, if we want you to round it, we'll tell you what to round it to. Everything will be just fine. Okay, move on to the next one. So we know the hypotenuse and we know A. Now, if you notice, the triangle's kind of flipped over onto the hypotenuse, but you got to remember where the right angle is, and we know that the angle that's or the side that's across from the right angle is the hypotenuse, and then the other two, so the other two angles, or the other two sides are the legs. So here we go again. So we're going to have to rearrange and end up doing a hypotenuse squared minus 2 squared. So in this case, we're going to have b squared equals 64 subtract 4, which is just 60. And so the b squared equals 60. So to find b, we have to do the square root of 60 and the square root of b squared. So get our calculator again, and we type in the number 60, do our square root, and we get 7.7 if we round it to the nearest tenth. And it could be, a little bit bigger decimal if we round it to some other amount. And you'll notice at some point in the future, they're actually going to allow you to just leave the answer as the square root of 60. But for now, we are going ahead and calculating that square root and doing some rounding. Okay, here's another one. We're looking for B, the base. We know the hypotenuse and we know A. So when we put it into the formula, we get 2 squared plus b squared equals 5 squared. When we do our rearranging, we end up with b squared equals 5 squared minus 2 squared. So quite literally, we're solving for b. We're solving for a variable like we did in our last unit when we were solving for y. And in order to get b by itself, we have to move 2 squared to the other side by subtracting it, which is what we're showing here. Then we do the math before we finish it off. So that's going to be 25 minus 4, which ends up being 21. So b squared equals 21. So if we do the square root of both sides, the square root of 21, and square root is 4.6 by rounding to the nearest tenth. 4.6. All right. Now here's one more, and if you notice, we've been going pretty strong about finding A or B, but we stuck another one in where, oh, we're just looking for the hypotenuse again. So all we have to do is go A squared plus B, or the base squared, equals C squared. And on today's assignment, you're going to see some of each type, so just be watching for what we're looking for. If you are looking for the hypotenuse, you don't need to do any rearranging and subtracting. You just square them and add them, right? If you are looking for one of the legs, then you're going to square the hypotenuse and the leg that you know and end up subtracting in order to get the leg that you don't know. So 144 plus 25 is 169, and that equals C squared. So if we take the square root of both sides, we get 13 equals C, and that's going to be our final answer. All right, so we're going to practice doing some of these using the Pythagorean theorem with either A, B, or C missing, and you just got to remember what to do. Good luck. Okay, so we're going to do the Alex assignment number 50, the Pythagorean theorem, find any side.